Welcome to the Evolve, Move, Play podcast. I'm your host, Rafe Kelley. At Evolve, Move, Play, our aim is to help you cultivate a more meaningful life and a more heroic self by reconnecting deeply to movement, mindfulness, nature, and community practices. This podcast was created to bring the best and brightest minds in all of these subjects together to better understand how we can create an empowering and sustainable ecology of practices for personal growth. If you're interested in being part of this ongoing conversation, the best way you can support us and get involved is by joining our Podcast Plus membership. By joining, you will get backstage access to our live podcast airing once a month, as well as a private question and answer session with me and our guests after the show. On top of that, you'll get access to our thriving online community where you can continue these deeper discussions with people all over the world who are just as passionate and curious about these topics as you. More details about the membership, as well as the link to get signed up, are in the description below. And whether you can join, be sure to like, share, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so that you can be notified every Monday when our episodes drop. Thanks so much for your support, and we hope you enjoy the show. Hey guys, welcome back to the Evolve, Move, Play podcast. This week, my guest is Michael Frosty Snow. Michael, or as I generally refer to him, Frosty, is somebody I've known in the parkour community for over 15 years. We've worked on a TV show together, and I've seen him build one of the most unique careers that I've seen in the parkour community. He's an amazing athlete. He's accomplished incredible things athletically. He's been a very successful competitor athletically within parkour, but he also has gone on to really utilize his creativity for many different purposes, and he's become kind of the premier color commentary guy for the parkour community. So I wanted to dig into his ideas on creativity and how to carve a career path with movement. I think he's got some of the greatest insights to share in this region. He's also really involved with Tempest Freerunning Academy and has helped design a lot of that. Most recently, he was involved in this amazing project with Pasha Petkuns and Red Bull, designing a giant pinball machine. So I'm going to put that in the description below. You can check that out. It's an amazing video. So yeah, without any further ado, enjoy my conversation with Frosty. Frosty, welcome to the podcast.
I'm excited to be here, Rafe. Thanks for having me.
So with you, I wanted to go back to the beginning and just ask you a little bit about how you got started, because my understanding is you're almost one of the first people to ever do parkour in the States, right? Like did you start with, what got you started doing parkour?
Well, I got started actually because of a martial arts teacher, a good friend of my family, because my parents were both involved in martial arts since before I was born. And he saw it on Ripley's Believe It or Not, back when it was Dean Cain on TBS, before YouTube, before all this stuff. He's just like, check this out. Next week it'll be on again, because we had to wait for reruns. Yeah. And it was a little feature on the Yamakasi. And I remember they showed like a bunch of crazy French dudes with like a map of the city being like, here's point A and here's point B, and we're going to get there. And then running around and doing a bunch of stuff in car parks. And I was just blown away. That same time, I think I had like saved up my money and bought up my first video camera to shoot, jackass videos with my friends. So my best buddy Bill and I just went out and jumped off the porch, and then went to the park and jumped off everything at the park, and then just kept looking around the city for things to do. And it sort of just all grew from there. That was the beginning of everything, at least for me here in the States, because I was like, I need more of this. I need to find people that are doing this. I need to get people to do this if there's no one to do it.
So do you remember what year that was? Was that like 2003, 2004?
Yeah, because I think I was 14 at the time, and I'm 34 now, so it's 20 years ago. And this is like right when I think things were starting to pick up on the internet and stuff. So there was no like really social stuff. It was all web forums, and there was only really one place for parkour on the internet, and that was a French language forum where they really didn't like. Yeah, it was like nobody there even liked people that weren't in France doing anything. And I remember seeing this dude Blake, that was one of the first guys who actually started the UK scene, and he's the one who did the first international meetup, and that's where Urban Free Flow sort of grew out of. How eventually Mark Turok and EZ got involved, and then it worked its way over from there. But the first people I met in the US were actually a small group of guys in Michigan, and then the Chicago scene actually was one of the first ones that really developed at least in the Midwest and in the big US scenes, because they had great architecture there. They had a great opportunity, and Ando and his brother Cloud, Ryan Cousins, they sort of kicked things off. They were some of the first guys I ever saw doing like pretty legit flips. I remember seeing a guy do a double leg for the first time, and it just blew my mind. It was like, my gosh, what is even happening? And I remember going and meeting up with them, and things just kept growing. We had our first statewide jam that we helped organize in Michigan, and then the first nationwide jam in New York, which was amazing. You saw like 150 guys just running around. I fell in the Hudson River. It was the best time of my life. I was like just getting into high school then. And then eventually I remember we did the first international jam in Toronto and met Dano and Drunk Monk and a bunch of those guys. And that's where I met Mark Turok as well for the first time. And it was just insane. I just remember like over 200 people just swarming the city. And here I was, this kid who a couple of years earlier didn't know anybody that did anything like this. And it just grew so fast.
Yeah, I came into the scene in 2005, or I started, I think I was like, I may have discovered it in like late 2004, but when I came around, it still felt like there were almost nobody in the United States doing it, right? Like there was, and I think of myself as part of the en avance du jour's generation, right? Like that was the specific video that David Bell made that was shared around via like web, video sharing sites before YouTube.
I had like a downloaded real player file of it that I kept like watch before going out to go training.
Yeah. And it was like, for a long time, I was like, that was like the first generation, but Tyson had been training longer than me. Tyson Cheka, who co-founded Parkour Visions. But he's vague. He has terrible memory. I don't know. You can't pin him down, but he came from the Ripley's Believe It or Not generation, which is like, is the true OGs of American parkour. I mean, how many guys do you know who came from that era and stayed in it? Ando, Ryan, was Levi from that area?
Levi started a couple of years after I did. He got into it. I remember he told me once he saw a video of, I think his name was Joe Yago.
Joe Yago, yeah, I remember.
Yeah, do some crazy tricks, and so he just really wanted to learn how to do, I think a wall flip or something. He just like got so inspired to learn how to do tricks. So he was smart, unlike me, who just like went and jumped off my porch. He went to the gymnastics facility, and they were like, "Yeah, well, we can teach you a backflip, and then from there it should be pretty easy." And we were very fortunate that Water's Edge Gymnastics in Traverse City, Michigan, which is a small town where Levi and I are from, they were a small gymnastics facility. They had some really great coaches, and they were totally open to it. Unlike a lot of other gymnastics places, they early on saw, we could do this. And I think because, it wasn't a huge gym, it wasn't like churning out Olympians or anything, they were open to doing stuff. And they actually hosted some of the first like parkour training open gym things. And they were the ones who helped Levi learn his tricks. So when I met Levi, he was already doing big backflips off of stuff. And I was just, okay, yeah, you could maybe learn the ways of parkour since you got a solid foundation and doing these insane tricks already. But yeah, so he was just a couple years after me, and we had a little crew of like former inline skaters and some of my jackass friends, and just mostly just the crazy kids that sort of didn't fit in anywhere. We all just started running around town and climbing on stuff and editing it all to Linkin Park songs.
It sounds about right for the time.
Yeah.
So you came up through the scene, and you were really early on. You were involved in the organization of these jams early on, right?
Yeah. And I remember we had started to organize stuff, and there was some different forums that we were going to. Urban Free Flow had kicked off a US forum, which I remember we started to sort of talk about wanting to do our own thing. And I think on the forum, it was sort of recognized that the US scene was building its own thing. So then Mark Turok, I remember he was still a part of Urban Free Flow at the time, was like, oh, we are going to start Urban Free Flow US and we'll invite you to be ambassadors. And like, you've been nominated by people, and sort of got on top of that stuff early on, which in its own way, I think was really good, because we were just kids who wanted to jump around and get more people jumping around. So having somebody with some sense of organization and structure, albeit however loose or whatever motivated, it really led us to start building something. And I remember when Mark sort of split from UF and was like, well, I'm going to take this same team of people, and I think we should build our own thing just for the US, which was the start of American Parkour and eventually the Tribe. And that was a big shift for me, because it went from all of these little individual things where we're just messaging each other and trying to get whoever we could to come to stuff, to say like, actually, let's build sort of a network of people that are all working together. And I remember that was the first time we all came together in DC to shoot the tutorial DVD that sort of laid out basics for all the different moves. And that was the most real I think it had ever felt for me at the time, because, you know, we got this, like, all these amazing athletes, all the people I knew, like Ryan Ford from Colorado. And, you know, like I remember like seeing Jesse Woody, who was like, at the time, I thought like the strongest man in the world, you know. It was like just all these people who I remember seeing Paul Medeiros, Leon, he's just like had the biggest broad jumps I'd ever seen. And I was like, where I was from, I had the biggest broad jumps I had ever seen. And so it was just this cool moment to really feel like not just people who were excited about the sport, but people that wanted to build something bigger, beyond even just like the excitement around this idea, but the community that it could develop. And we were bringing those communities together, and it was a really cool time.
So when Mark came over and started APK, that was 2006, 2007.
Yeah, it would have to be. It was right around then, because I remember I graduated high school in 2005, and we were already doing stuff then. It was around that time when everything was building up and starting to happen. Because I remember 2006 is when we did the Madonna Tour, and we already had the Tribe going. And I remember was a big turning point for me, because I basically was like, ooh, am I going to stay in school? Like, am I going to keep going to college and like trying to get a degree in film, or am I going to just do this full time? And so then by 2007, I was out of school and just full time as a pro athlete. And we'd already had like some small sponsors at the time. I'd gotten to work with some various different people, but 510 was the big one at the time. And they were really investing in the sport in a big way for them, a small way now looking back at it.
Yeah.
But it was awesome to see, like, oh my gosh, the shoe companies are like making shoes for free running. And they weighed like 500 pounds. You know, stealth rubber is not so stealthy when you're like trying to run on it. But it was cool to see.
They did come out. My favorite shoe of all time was still the 510 Descent. When they came out with that like low profile approach shoe. It was a crossover for parkour and didn't mark things up.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was great to see it, because they actually were one of the companies that really listened to the athletes and were like, oh, what we gave you wasn't great. Well, which of our shoes do you like? Okay, what can we do to that? I mean, when we got sponsored by K-Swiss, it's like, for financially, for the development of the sport, I think it was a huge deal. But the shoes, everybody knows the Ariakis were terrible, and they didn't talk to anybody about that. They just had some random guy design it. And it was ironic, because K-Swiss was already making some of the most popular free running shoes. I mean, everybody from Daniel Obaka to Oleg were wearing SI-18s and coveting them, and they were busy trying to slap these chunky Ariakis on everybody. And so I think it was definitely a growth point through there. And now we're obviously way on the other side of it, where we're getting, for us, by us, for us, like real shoes made by free running companies, which I think has always been something I thought was going to be a game changer. And I think it has been, and it will continue to be.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that goes. So yeah, I'm still really curious, honestly, just because I came in 2005, and like I said, it felt so small then. And by then, you'd been doing it for 4 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, what were those first 4 years like? Like, were you just kind of doing it quietly with your friends, or was there stuff starting to percolate?
I mean, in my mind, it was it was just blowing up. And that was just me being like, oh, there's like a couple people doing it.
Yeah.
And it felt huge to me because I was like, I didn't know if this was, I was one of those kids that easily got excited about things which nobody else cared about. And so I think like this was something where I could easily have seen it being not even a fad. Like it hadn't even gotten to the place where it was a fad yet. I think that came later once you had like Madonna getting involved or Casino Royale or
YouTube.
The Office. Like, yeah, YouTube, like all those moments were moments when it could have been a fad. We weren't even at that place yet. We were well before that. So I think for me, I felt a lot of personal connection to it. And I also felt like the community we were building was very tight knit, and I was recognized as myself within it. I think one of the reasons why everybody used their screen names as like sort of like their b-boy names or your alter egos was because you got to build who you were in that place. And I was like an awkward, like multiracial kid in a small, pretty much all white northern Michigan town. And I felt like, oh, I actually have a sense of self now around this thing. And even in my town, I became known as like the kid who can do a backflip. And like, that's how I got my prom date. And, like, that's how I like, was my signature for everything. And so as I started to see more people popping up and being in some way like a leader of that movement as it grew, felt amazing. So every time I heard of a new community, even if I wasn't involved, I got excited about it. I remember going to Hawaii to see my family out there and meeting up with Eric Terry, GameWise. He's like the guy who had actually designed the APK logo and the tribe logo and a lot of the early stuff. He's an amazing artist. And we got maybe 5 or 6 people together out in Hawaii. And I just thought it was like the coolest thing. It was the first time I wore my tribe shirt. And I was like, I'm sponsored back in Michigan. Like, yeah, I'm out there. Like, I've done some deals. I remember like we would get these jobs. It would be like Timberland would want us to like pressure test some shoes, and they'd give us like $100 gift card to a Timberland store. And I was like, oh yeah, I just this big gig out in Chicago. It was like really sick. They brought me out for it. But at the time it just felt like it was growing because people were like, oh my gosh, like I saw your stuff. Like I downloaded the video the other day. And I think you started to be like, oh, there is a world of people out there paying attention. It's just at the time was really small, but all we saw was each other. And so every time these jams kept happening, and each time they would be bigger. The first statewide jam in Michigan was essentially like my crew of like maybe 6 or 7 guys meeting up with another group that had 5 or 6 guys. And it felt amazing because that's twice as many people as I'd ever seen doing it seriously in one place. And then by the time we got to the international or the PKNY jam, that was like over 100 people getting together. And I was just blown away. It was as if it had exploded overnight. But of course, that was still small. That was just like a really well organized event that got a lot of people there at the exact right time. And I think it really started to make sense as more people in different areas started to raise their hand and say like, yeah, well, this is what I'm doing in my community. You could do this too. And like, okay, here's how we're organizing. Here's how we're talking to gymnastics places to let us use the facility. Here's how like the kinds of locations we're finding. Oh, you don't have good spots. Well, have you looked at parking garages? They tend to have really good stuff. Or like, hey, did you see this video? No, I didn't see it. Like, oh, here, let me get you this link. Like, because it was like, even just finding a video of somebody doing it. And one of the things I think is crazy is we were all just watching videos of David Bell and Yamakasi and like getting illegal copies of the Luc Besson like Yamakasi film and being like, oh, this is what we should be doing. Like seeing guys who'd already been doing it for over a decade and being like, okay, we're going to copy that stuff. There weren't like at the time, like, here's building blocks to make yourself like a more proficient trainer. Like here's like skills you can build up. It's just like, I remember like one of the first moves we learned was how to do like a 270 cat to cat because there was just a spot to do it at the park. And it was, even that was like 8 feet up, but we're like, it's fine. There's like mulch. And so we just fell a couple times and we like learned it. And then we're like, okay, what else can we do? And I remember doing early like versions of drop cats, like descent style, just because we were like, they're here. And we found the things to do it. And there weren't a lot of other things, but we'd seen somebody do it in a video and we're like, let's go for it. Oh, well, I see them doing these giant jumps off of things. Like, let me jump off whatever is really big. And that's going to show if I'm good or not.
I remember that era. Yeah. It was fun at that era because there was a bit of blank space, right? There was a bit of like, having to fill in the gaps. I remember looking at the litparkour.net and seeing like salle du chat, salle de fond, salle de bras, right? Like léché. And like,
Yeah.
they were just images, right? They weren't even videos on the site, right? And then when like Vaults 101 came out, I was like, oh yeah.
Oh, thank God somebody figured this out.
Yeah.
Actually try all this stuff. Yeah, I mean, we didn't even know the names of stuff. I remember we used to call cat leap squeaks because that's the noise it made when we hit the wall. Like it's like, oh, let's see if you can do a big squeak over there. Just try to hit it and go for it.
Apologies for that.
No worries.
Squeak. I like that. That's a good name.
Yeah. And it's I think it's good that we survived that time. I mean, my body is still like, I'm still paying some of the price for some of those early days. Yeah. But I think a lot of that learning ended up being the basis for, making, like I said, the first tutorial DVD, which is not great, but it helped a lot of people get started. And I think from the criticisms of that, then there's improved versions, and now there's like better tutorials, and now there's like a tutorial for everything, and there's tutorials, advanced tutorials for doing even better versions or harder things. And I think now you see people learn, like you said, you can learn a backflip in 45 minutes, and there's a space for that. There's ways to do that. And
yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I remember 2006, nobody could do a clean climb up, right? It was like Levi and Tyson. That was it, right? Now there's a million 11-year-olds who can do a climb up and cork off the wall, right?
Yeah. But I mean, somebody had to pave the way for that with busted knees and bad top outs, and now we're seeing the fruits of those labors, especially in the young people of today. And I think that's one of the things, like, especially thanks to the gyms, that have come up, Tempest Academy and Visions, and a lot of these spots have just given young people access to the knowledge that's going to help them, to the facilities that are going to help hone those skills, and competitions and jams and meetups. They've all sort of painted a picture for what it could be like to be an athlete. And I love to talk about people like Ellis Torhall and Noah Georgina. They're like unreal athletes. At 16, they are doing things that were unthinkable just a few years ago, and they're doing it with ease and a smile on their face because this is what they've been doing for years. And they're growing, and literally, like, their bodies are going through puberty at a time when this is all they're doing. And so they're like crafted for perfection in the sport, and it's amazing to watch.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think I've been watching Ellis since he was 11, right? And to see him at Art of Motion this year and be like, holy, wow, like, this is crazy the development that's happened. Just his submission for Art of Motion was insane, right? His giant double side flip gap, I think, was a part of what he did. This kid's 16 years old.
Yeah, and I think we've seen it, and I'm not trying to take too much credit for this, but I think the stuff like Tempest Online's really created a sort of format for people focusing on this stuff. And if you look at Twin Parkour, the Rudolph twins, like, they put in videos. Ellis Torhall, his video, like Sarush, like, a lot of these people are just essentially using those clips from the online competitions like Tempest Online's, and they're putting together these submission tapes that are just like, this is how we move now. It's like you see these like 15-second runs of people just doing the most insane things that would have been like one-off moves a couple years ago, just in a line, like back to back to back to back. And then they're like, let me slap a couple of those together, and look at this, now I'm one of the best in the world. Well deserved. It's
definitely seeing some quantum leaps in performance. So I was curious, so you started real early, right? And you had some kind of communication with the French scene early on, and then you were on the Madonna Tour, and Sebastian Foucan was on that tour as well.
Yeah, that was such an incredible opportunity. And as an athlete, I was thoroughly unprepared for it. I think they had gotten Levi on the tour because originally they wanted Oleg on it. Mm-hmm. Madonna's like an avid sort of pop culture fan, and had seen Sebastian and got him involved, and then wanted another person, and saw Oleg's Russian climbing video, and just couldn't get him into the US. And so she'd been using some of her dancers to do stuff, and they just kept getting injured. It was a really tough tour. The physical stamina needed and the sort of dexterity in terms of what they were doing was really tough. And she had just seen too many getting injured. So they brought on another free runner who was Levi, and he was killing it. Just doing amazing.
Levi Muenberg, for those scoring in the audience.
Yes.
You can look him up.
You can check out his videos from 10 years ago and you'll still be impressed now.
Yeah.
And actually what he's doing now is fantastic. If you're interested in sustainable living and eco farming stuff, it's also amazing, but very different. But yeah, and he had also had some tweaks. It was like just a dangerous setup. One of the things is she didn't use air conditioning in her shows because for environmental reasons, but it was causing a lot of condensation on the floors. So it was very slippery, and there was parts of it where you're jumping off the stage into the audience. So it was kind of deadly. So I showed up and actually was going to audition the first time, and they ended up hiring Zin, the urban ninja, instead. He's another guy with a famous YouTube video, but he ended up getting the job for one day and then getting fired, I think because of his hair or something. It was like, look, I don't know what it was. And so I came back a couple weeks later and actually got to audition, got the gig, and did, I think, like 4 weeks on the tour before I got let go. And then they went overseas and brought on Oleg. And it was hectic for me because they were asking me to do a lot of tricks that I wasn't totally comfortable with. I was still learning how to, I was self-taught on all these flips. And so I was just sort of like going for it and hoping I could do it. And I ended up hitting my head on a backflip, which really messed with my mind. And they just really wanted me to do it on some kind of sketchy setup. But I think the rest of it, like being there with Sebastian, Levi, that's where I met Victor Lopez, who was one of the founders of Tempest. And we just really got to talk about free running. It's actually where I talked to Sebastian about being more involved in the scene, because it was at a time when people were really arguing a lot about parkour and free running and what it meant and what it was. And I was like, look, people are essentially deciding for themselves, and you have such a strong personal philosophy around this, like people will listen to you, like get that message out there. And I don't know if somebody was doing the same thing for David Bell, but he was not listening. He was not involved and had no interest in talking to people about what he felt at that time. So Sebastian ended up sort of putting together a statement and getting it out there. And it was a really cool thing to see. I even remember we organized a jam in New York when we were out there and got a bunch of people to Central Park and had so much fun. And I remember Sebastian was actually supposed to go get like a scan of his wrist because he had like broken a bone in his wrist, but he delayed it so that he could do the jam, which was really cool. So many people came out. But I think there was like one of the craziest things I'd ever seen at the time. He's giving this speech before he goes to the doctor, and he's like, everyone put your hands in, like, remember, like we do this for love, and this is a way to express yourself and explore your environment, and there's no point in talking bullshit on the internet because that's not going to help anyone and it's not going to help you. And I was just, I was really inspired at that moment. And I heard these kids just like making all this noise in the back, and I kind of took it on myself to be like, yo guys, what's up? Like, come on, this is like, you're going to miss this moment that you're not going to get again. Who knows the next time you're going to have one of the founders of this movement here. And I just saw them fighting, and the one kid goes to the other, he's like, look, just admit it, man. You're a free runner. No, I'm not. I'm a Tresor. Like, I don't know, free runner. He's like, no way, man. I was down at Battery Park. We saw you doing side flips. Just say you're a free runner. And the other kid punched him in the face. And I lost it, man. I was like, what is going on? Like, this is not important. You're missing the point of, you're missing the guy who made up the word free running, telling you that this is just online bullshit that's getting into your head. And you're missing the chance to grow here, to learn this lesson from some of the source itself, because you're too busy arguing over what to call something. And I think that really inspired me to say, like, that part doesn't matter. It's good to know the history. It's good to understand the differences or whatever, but it's also not the most important thing. And so I don't waste a lot of time trying to, explain the differences to people. I think it's become quite common for people to call themselves free runners and to say they're doing parkour, and like at the same time, like yes, like there's more specific explanations, and every time I do an art of motion, I have to explain those differences, and that's fine. I'm happy to do it, but I don't really think that's the point. If anything, I wish it would just be more consistent so we could have less of these arguments.
Yeah, I mean, I've started to think of it. I just think of parkour as a big container, right? And then there's also a smaller container within it, which could be like, it's like the wide sense of parkour, which is playing around on obstacles, and the narrow sense of parkour, which is, I guess, whatever David Bell decides he wants it to be, because it seemed to change. It was anti-competition, and then it was for the Olympics. But
yeah,
I mean, these guys who founded it, like it wasn't complete. It wasn't like they went to a patent office and described exactly what they were trying to do and had it all philosophically laid out because they, spent years engineering it. Like they were just practicing and figuring things out and came up with different names. But I do think there's a lot of profound stuff in those original practitioners, right? I've had Sebastian on the show, and who talked about how he had that broken wrist for 6 months on the Madonna Tour, I think.
Yeah, it was brutal.
And it's interesting to hear your history with that, because I think I remember that you were somewhat active on the APK forum back then, and I think you like pretty much never weighed into discussions around free running versus parkour. You just sailed right past that stuff.
I just find it like such a distraction from so many other things which are so much more valuable.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot that can be discussed, and I do think that debate can be healthy, and I think I think when we had the pro takeover in LA, it was something that came up, but we decided to do was frame the conversation around what is best for like sort of everyone. Like, how should we talk about this? Not like, what is the definition? Do we need to like put a stamp on it? It was like, how do we all decide to get behind this together as professional athletes around the world, as business owners, and as sort of the people pushing this culture forward? What are we going to do? And there was definitely things on both sides. I do think it was pretty clear that nobody was going around calling themselves traceurs anymore. So it was like very easy to be like, okay, we're just going to be free runners from now on. And I think for me, it's like there is just more productive things we can do with our time than continue to do something which only ends up dividing us. It's a much bigger scene now, but it's not so big that we can really afford to just be shaving off segments of who does what. It's like, I want to embrace more people because we can all work together on so many of these things. And if we keep opening it up wider and wider, then we're just going to end up under a really big umbrella like gymnastics, which I definitely don't want.
Yeah. I remember, I mean, I was like part of the purists, right? Like I didn't flip for 2 years, even though I came from a gymnastics background. And I remember like the first NAPC, Jesse LaFleur came, like, the free runnerist of the free runners, right? And he just killed it in the speed round, and he killed it in a unique way. He had a different vision. And I was like, okay, well, there's obviously a point at which you're mostly just training acrobatics for acrobatic purposes, but there's a lot of crossover here. And there's a lot of people who can hang in both areas, right? Like Nate Weston, one of my former students, who's one of your teammates, right? He came out and ran a speed round with us and just crushed everybody at the local scene, right? So I think there's a lot of crossover in those skill sets, and it's totally, I don't see any reason why people shouldn't play with both, or that they need to conceive of them as distinctly different, right? It's kind of just different flavors of the same thing.
And I think from like a very fundamental standpoint, like I grew up wrestling. I was like a state finalist, and like we spent so long drilling all these different techniques and working on so many different like conditioning and exercise, everything, all this kind of training for this wide variety of things. And like most of wrestling, it's just like two people holding on to each other, just kind of pushing and pulling like back and forth. And then there's like a fraction of a second where a move happens, and then you're in another position just pushing and pulling.
Yeah.
And it's like you build out sort of this arsenal of movement, this understanding that's more all encompassing, so that in the end you can basically use one small part of it. And if you're trying to train like purist parkour, like A to B, like that's great. You're probably going to be most effective if you just spend all your time running. so it's like, if you really want to focus on that's fine, but it's like learning all the other skills, like you're saying, is sort of like advancing your eyes, it's building out your body awareness, it's helping. I mean, all of the best training I've done, like ukemi training, like for falling, the best stuff comes from free running.
Oh yeah.
Like saving yourself, it's all that. It's like built from body awareness when you're in a position that is not like knees over toes, heads forward, like everything, like perfect. It's like when you're in a weird, awkward spot, you're like all of a sudden like, oh, if I just naturally react, your body knows what to do. And that's only because of all this extra training. So I agree. It's best to do the most variety and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that was a funny thing on the forums, the arguments about what pure parkour should look like.
Yeah.
It's actually really environmental specific. One thing I'm really into right now is canyoning. And so you go into these canyons, you drop down, using a rappel down a waterfall, and then you try to get down the canyon, right? So a lot of people just hike, but I like to run, right? I like to try to get down the canyon as fast as possible. And we'll be going fast going into the canyon because we only have so much time. And it's like, well, there's lots of step faults, right? But it turns out that like being able to slide well and being able to transition quickly to like a crab walk position and out of a crab walk position, super relevant in those types of environments. It's like slopes or something that people aren't familiar with.
Yeah.
Like wet slopes and diffuse dirt, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you've read this book, but there's a famous old book called The Night Climbers of Cambridge.
I haven't read that book. I've heard about it. Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of your listeners would probably be fascinated by it. It's really cool story about one of the earliest sort of climbing groups that was based in Cambridge, and they climbed the school, and they got really interesting history. It's a whole story that you could probably do an entire podcast on. Yeah. But one of the big divisions in their group was like the ones who thought you should only use your body versus ones that said, well, you can't go everywhere with only your body. You need ropes to access certain areas. So is it about what you can do with your body or about being able to go wherever you want to go? And those are two different perspectives on the same sort of activity, but with different goals in mind. One is like, yes, we're going to use ropes because I want to be able to go anywhere. And that's why I started this in the first place. The other one's like, well, I did this to see what I was capable of. So I'm only use my body. And they also had ones that were like, you have to do this only at night, and ones that said you only could do it after 2 beers. So they have a lot of different perspectives on it, but no one is correct. This is like a made up game that we all play. And it's up to you to decide how you want to play this game and what the rules are for yourself until you want to play with others, I guess.
Yeah. So I wanted to kind of shift a little bit and focus on creativity, because I think that's one of your big areas of interest. Like I remember you approached me and wanted to talk about creativity at the parkour summit back in the day. And I think the way that you've crafted your career through using parkour is actually something that a lot of young people coming up could learn from, right? In the scene is like, how do you actually make a career out of this? Because it's not easy. And I think your perspective on creativity is actually important. So let's start with creativity within parkour, right? How do you approach cultivating your creativity? And how do you develop that mindset? Because you had a very unique approach to movement. By the time that I encountered you, you were kind of moving in a way that was very different from other people on the scene.
Well, it's interesting you talk about having a career in parkour and creativity, because I think one of my earliest sort of motivators for creativity was because I was doing jobs, like performance jobs. And oftentimes I was partnered with my good friend, Levi Muenberg, who has some of the cleanest, strongest, most acrobatic movement in the sport at the time. And there was no way that I was able to do what he was doing. So I knew that I needed to do something different. And so for me, it was always looking at the space I was in and saying, okay, well, what can I do here that nobody else would think of doing? So sometimes that meant finding like a unique piece or space of a structure or an environment. Or in some cases, it meant thinking about myself on the other side of things, which is like the audience perspective. And like, what could I do if I wasn't just thinking about myself, but I was thinking about my relationship to an audience member. And I think that's when it started to become more of a performance art as opposed to just self-expressive art. Because when I was first starting, it was just like, what can I do with my body? And over the years, I definitely played with that a lot, especially actually in my later years, when I was more physically, I would say, behind where a lot of the other athletes were, but I still wanted to participate at an elite level. I really started to play just with what I could do with my body that felt comfortable. And that got me into some more interesting shapes and motions. But early on in my career, it was very much performance based. It was, how do I create a moment for somebody that has either something unexpected or exciting or dramatic that they wouldn't believe? So I think I started to involve their sort of experience of seeing it and revealing something, like coming from a place that isn't expected or utilizing a part of the environment that nobody else would look for. That's why I started to really like very tiny underbars, sort of that Jackie Chan style, or even looking, at some sort of like Buster Keaton sort of like fake outs, stuff that people like Pasha ended up, sort of making into his signature, and has obviously been super successful. And also looking at other cultures like breakdancing and b-boy culture, which I think really had a lot to do with creating excitement for a crowd. And it just, for me, kind of built along this path. Like, and as videos became a bigger part of the sport with the onset of YouTube, I think I recognized that it wasn't just the most talented people that made the most interesting videos.
Yeah.
And eventually that led me into storytelling, which I think was one of the most exciting parts for me. And that's where stuff like Frosty Saves the Day came from. I was like getting very interested in props and the different ways that we could interact with stuff. I mean, I started off just like messing with my hat and sunglasses, and that was something I'd been doing in Chicago a lot at the time. And then in DC, I really started to play around with it. I mean, I had also some like kind of dark times in DC where I was like kind of depressed and like just like I hated what I was doing, and so I wanted to do different things. I remember we shot a video. Skipper came up with the idea to do the first 3D video. It was like blue and red 3D vision, like old school. But I was just like, I'm gonna do this whole section in handcuffs, just because like I thought it was kind of funny, but also like created like a different vibe. It was like a new challenge for me. Or like this, I'm gonna just see what I can do with a hat. Like I'd seen break dancers doing stuff with hats. I'm gonna try stuff with a hat. And by the time I got to Frosty Saves the Day, I was living out in California, and I was sort of thinking of like, well, this is like, why aren't we seeing people integrating these things the way I saw like, people like Jackie Chan, like telling a story through this movement. And I remember I had this idea about using a belt and doing a devil drop, like an inward side flip off of the wall with the belt. And I was just like, I'd climb stuff with it. I'd seen like, like people going up palm trees, and I was like, it's so there, but I was like, why would I have this? And so from there I was like, oh, well, maybe I need to take somebody's belt, and I don't want to take my belt because my pants will fall off. And I was like, oh, somebody else's pants should fall off. Well, whose pants? It's kind of mean to take someone's pants, and like I want to be like a superhero. And that's where I got this idea to like, oh, I'm going to take someone's pants off that's a bad guy, and that's going to like sort of save the day. And so I had that idea, and from there I was just like, okay, how else can like a free runner save the day? Because we would always like, I mean, I'm sure you had moments where you felt like Batman or something. You're like a superhero. I'm out here, like I could be like a real life hero somehow. And so it's for me, started off as a lot of little things. I was like, oh, well, maybe I can like clean the clothes up off the floor, or like catch like this muffin before it gets dirty, or like help somebody recycle when they were going to throw something in the garbage, or save this goldfish off the top of the car. Like it was like, it didn't have to be like all of these game changing, like, oh, I'm going to like save the day, like the world's going to end. It's like, oh, there's a lot of ways that you can be a real life hero. And that project for me was just a really fun way to explore how you can be creative in multiple ways. And it's not just about like who can come up with a new trick which no one has done before, but also like what can you do with those tricks, and how can they be more than just a gimmick or a gag?
Yeah, I mean, there's only there is some kind of limit to how many flips and twists you can do, or how many orientations of flips or twists, though we seem to keep breaking the limit. But there's always only a few people who are able to be the people pushing that edge. And there's lots of other edges to push, right? I love Louis West lateral creativity, right? Okay. You don't have to go from a backflip to a double backflip or a full twist. Like, how many variations of the backflip can you create that offer some opportunity for fun, personally, or for some expression, right? There's a few things I want to dig into there. One, so you had a background as a wrestler. Did you also have a track and field background?
Yeah, I did hurdles, long jump, and 100-meter relay.
Because you're talking about, like, if I look at your style, I would say, like, you're not the most advanced acrobatic athlete, right? Your style is this flow and this connection, this humor that you brought to it. And I was thinking back, so for the audience who's not aware, Frosty was a competitor on a show called Jump City, Seattle. And I was one of the judges. I was behind the scene on that show. And you kind of dominated that show, especially after Levi broke his wrist. And I think there was a lot. Well, I actually think you've kind of attracted a little bit of hate over the years for a variety of reasons.
Oh yeah. Somewhat purposefully. Well, I think it's quite interesting because it plays on some of these themes, right? I mean, part of your creativity is the persona of Frosty, right? And I think it's amazing to me how many people don't get the joke, because to me it's really obvious. Yeah, but we've also spent a good amount of time hanging out together.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of people miss it. And I think I remember meeting Tim Sheaf for the first time when we did Ninja Warrior together, and he was just blown away because he was like, "Oh, I thought you were kind of a dick, man." Like, and it's like, yeah. Well, I also know, like, we're trying to get on TV, and I have a reality TV background, so I was like, I recognized from my time doing shows like Survivor that if everybody is there, like, saying like, "Oh, I just want to be best friends with everyone," then it's not going to be very exciting. And I also believe in healthy competition and in getting people riled up, because it creates more excitement, and we are all friends at the end of the day. And even as I started getting like more opportunities to get behind the mic and talk about people, I use this opportunity to kind of talk shit about my friends, because it does like create a bigger world around all of this.
You've added
a lot of people don't like me. It's okay.
Fun elements of trolling to the being behind the mic. I remember you calling Mish, talking about Mish, 8 feet tall.
385 pounds, 8 feet tall. We started a rumor about Mish that he ate a guy once. and the trick to this, and like, maybe I'm ruining it for some people, but I'm sure a lot of people that heard like a little bit, is you always like start this rumor, which is somewhat based in truth, but also like you work it down. So you'd be like, "Oh yeah, well, there's a rumor that he ate a guy," and people would be like, "Oh, that's dumb." Like, it was like, well, not the whole thing, just like a little piece of it. Like, they got in a fight and he stuck his hand in his face, and so he like bit a little piece of his finger off, and like, we don't know that he swallowed it, but nobody found the piece, and so then for like years there was like a little rumor going around that Misha ate a guy once. It's just it's
amazing. Well, I mean, kids are impressionable, right? Like, we started a rumor at Parkour Visions once that I'd slapped somebody and killed them, and like, totally, it was a joke, like just something that was like a meme that we played out for a day, and like a year later, like, I'd still hear kids like whispering about it. I was like,
slapped a guy to death once.
So
open hand.
So what I was remembering, like, what was interesting about Jump City, well, there's a couple things that was interesting for me watching you as an athlete at Jump City. So in the style rounds, it was like you had a cheat code, because you were the only person who got the value that flow was being put to in the criteria, right? It was like, I saw people getting frustrated because they'd be trying to throw this huge trick and then get smashed down.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, like, the criteria were put before you, flow was high on it, and nobody seemed to know how to create a linked line besides you. And then I think No Soul really figured it out, or Brian Orozco figured it out towards the end.
Yeah.
But
definitely in time for that sudden death finals match.
Yeah.
He definitely worked it out there. And I messed it up. But yeah, I mean, to me, it was really obvious. I looked at the scoring criteria and I said, this is the only way that I'm not going to like max out difficulty, and it's not as heavily weighted as flow and execution. If those two are the highest anyway, I can definitely get creativity. And I also looked at the environments we were in, and Seattle, as you know, there's a lot of wetness, there's a lot of rain, and the sets we were on, there was a lot of like new things being built. So it wasn't always like ideal. And I was like, if I risk the biscuit on like trying to go for my biggest tricks, they're already not going to be as high level difficulty as like Levi or Dylan Baker, these other dudes
Albert,
that are willing to go.
Spider.
Yeah. Spider is like, I mean, he's doing nuts stuff that's still hard to this day. And I was like, okay, well, this to me seems like an obvious choice. And I'm gonna just basically do what I would do if this was a performance, and just make sure everything's linked. And if I got lost, I would just keep doing the lowest level difficulty moves and link them until I got myself right back on track. And it was like a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater run, where you sort of like do little things and then hit the manual in between, and it keeps your score going.
Yeah.
And I just kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And I kept thinking like, okay, the first time it worked and I got a good score, and I was like, oh, thank God, like I've got a chance here. But I figured everyone was going to catch on and start doing it. But I don't know if they were just caught in this camera cycle where they're like, I've got to do my biggest things. Like for me, it was like, oh, well, I'm going to look good because I'm giving them hella funny interviews, and I'm scoring well. So they're going to be the ones talking about how great I am. Like, I don't need to do that. I'm sharing that job with Brady Romberg. Like we can just do our best. And if our team does well, then we're going to be in a good place. And we had a great speed team. And we just needed the help on the freestyle side. So I was like, I'm going to step up as much as I can there.
Yeah. So for some reason, I'm just remembering Albert, right? Who was incredible. He was so high level in the acrobatics at that point. And we had this rickety like swing setup at Freeway Park, right?
Oh.
On wet grass. And Albert goes for this, like, I think it was like it
was a back cliche to a wall flip off of it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, yeah,
and
sketchy, so sketchy.
I mean, he's swinging on it. He has to know that it's not that solid, right? And so he lands on, like splats on the ground. And I'm like, dude, this guy is an insane stud, but like, I can't score that high.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally. And then I mean, I don't disagree with this scoring method. I think there is benefit to encouraging people to go for hard things, but I do think it's most exciting when they land it.
Yeah. Well, also, like you said, the environment, right? Like if we had a better designed, safer environment, then it might make sense to have a score set that optimized for difficulty a little bit more, right? But in that particular environment, the incentivization, made sense. So, but the other thing that I was thinking about in reference to that is, so you were killing it in the speed as well, especially with the stuff that wasn't as high, right? But like I remember you on top of that building hurtling over the obstacles, right?
Yeah.
I'd kind of gotten into hurdles already at that point, but that definitely like lit the fire under me to be like, hurdles are awesome, and everyone in parkour should understand hurdles.
I think I remember having a conversation with you about it after that.
Yeah.
It made sense to me. I was like, these things are so low. I've been hurdling for years. Like, why would I bother to like do a parkour move here when I can just run over this? It just seemed really obvious to me.
What I remember though was that the roof was slanted on both sides. So you were landing on a relatively narrow thing as you were hurdling. So it was a risky strategy too. Yeah.
I mean, everything on that had a little bit of risk involved to it. But I mean, I think I knew what I was good at and what I could do. And I was like, I'm going to do those things. And even like you said, like there was a height thing in, I remember at one of the plazas, we were like running on these beams, or like in the alley when there's a big I-beam. And I was just told Travis, I was like, you're doing it. I was like, I could do it, but it's not going to be as fast as if you do it. And I think he was getting pissed because I just kept taking anything that had sprinting lines in it. I was like, I'm doing it. Like, it's mine. But I also was like, look, I'm not here to like, just like be super friendly. It sounds like a reality TV. I'm not here to make friends. No, I was like, we're here to compete. And I know that I'm faster than you on a straightaway. So any place with sprinting, like I'm going to take it. And I know that you're faster than me at heights. So you're going to do them, even though I keep making you do the heights and the climb ups. That's what you're good at. And you're better than me and you're better than Skipper. So that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And poor Jeremy, we just didn't let him do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeremy that was a hard time. But yeah, so you had extremes like advantages in speed and power. Like I remember at NAPC in 2013, you still had one of the biggest standing broad jumps of any of the athletes.
Yeah. I mean, I have some really impressive thighs. Whatever. I mean, you have to tell me what muscles make me jump real good, but yeah.
Glutes.
I have those glutes. I have glutes and big feet.
Big feet. So I'm just interesting because like you're describing feeling like you weren't the most talented athlete, but you had certain physical gifts that were really uncommon at that point. How do you kind of see that as we reach the edge, like how you find those things that are your strengths versus other people's strengths, right? Like, why do you think that it is that you had so much ability with speed, but didn't have the confidence at height that say Dylan had, or Travis had, or the ability to sort of organize acrobatics the way Levi had?
I mean, I think what's true about this is true about anything. Like where your attention goes, that's where your energy is going to flow. You know, like I knew what I liked to do, and it was things that I was good at. And so I put energy into those things. And I think if I was focusing on being the most well-rounded athlete or the most diversely talented human being, I might have had different goals. But I was mostly interested in being a professional athlete in a sport that I loved. And to do that, I knew it was going to take certain things. And you're not going to be a legit pro athlete if you're just really good at a lot of things. Yeah. You're going to be a pro athlete if you can do amazing things, even if it's only one thing, if it's enough to get the attention that you need, the support that you need. Being a pro athlete is not about the people that are just the most dedicated. It's about the people that are professional. And, you know, you look at like Dom Tomato, you know, he is not gonna win a lot of speed or freestyle competitions, but he is one of the most recognizable dominant athletes in the sport right now, because he figured out what he's good at and he does it like crazy. And he keeps working on those things, and he's evolving the sport around those aspects. And he keeps, increasing his skills, doing various things, but it's not, I don't think I'm ever going to see him win Art of Motion. I don't think he's going to come out on top of any speed comps, but you can't deny that he is an incredible athlete doing amazing things. And it's the same thing Pasha did. Pasha is like really good at some specific things. If you ask him to run a speed course, he's not going to win. He can do a broad jump, but it's not going to be very far. And it was never going to be that far, but he has something special, and he kept building that up and building it and growing with it and changing it. And now, like, you know, you saw pinball, it's like this crazy project, which only he could do. Nobody else in the world could have utilized that 45-degree angle, 20-meter wall the way that he did. And that's the benefit of being a really talented individual. And he was able to bring his individuality and combine it with his creativity and his physical gifts, all of those things, and do something really special. And that's what attracted Red Bull. It's why they invested £1 million into making this project happen, because they see something special and they want to bring that forward. And I think that we spend a lot of time as people seeing what other people are doing well and trying to say like, oh, can I do that? Can I do this? And it's honestly, more often than not, more important, like with what can I do well? What can I bring? What is missing from the world that I can help shine a light on or bring out? And when you can find those things in yourself, you can do incredible stuff.
It's what reminds me of that Bruce Lee quote, right? You know, absorb what is useful, discard what is useless. add something that's uniquely your own. I think as we like progress as athletes, a lot of the sustainability and the continued interest comes from that, adding what is uniquely your own. Like for me, it's been trees, right? And now it's canyons, right? It's like these are unexplored edges, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good answer. I think it's fascinating to watch what's happening with Dom, because he's so much better at the thing that he does than anybody else. Like I would say he's like an order of magnitude. It's incomparable, right? Like nobody else is going to look at the things that he's trying to do right now at all.
But they see them now. So next week, he may not be the best anymore, because there is literally 1 million kids watching him do what he does every day. And as soon as they see it, then that's open. The light is on for them. Yeah. And so now it's like next week, who's going to be doing it? We don't know. But I think, once we saw somebody do a foot precision to a rail, how many foot precisions to rails have we seen now? Like we saw somebody do a Kong gainer. Now we're seeing Kong double gainers. Or I saw, I saw, wall down monkey Kong gainer. Like it's like people are going to take whatever they see, and it's proven that when we can absorb from other people that something is possible, then it opens up, literal like neural pathways for us that we can start seeing, well, how could I do this? Or what could I do in this? Or maybe I can't do that, but what about this? And, we're all growing together.
It's kind of an interesting idea to think that like, that's kind of one of the most lasting impacts you can have on a sport is not necessarily to be the best, but to be the guy who sets some edge, who redefines what the territory is. Like you said with Dom, like it'd be hard to argue that Dom is the best parkour athlete in the world in any direction other than the thing that he does, which is giant flips, right? Giant drops. It still drives me crazy that his climb ups look sloppy, right? Like, how are you doing that and you can't clean up your climb up, right? Because he's obviously physically strong enough, but he's just not interested in putting the time into that, right? And technically grooving it in. He's just going to go do his thing. But doing his thing, he's opened a path. Like there's all these things that are completely unimaginable that now are imaginable to millions of kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we see like people develop their bodies for specific things. Like I wouldn't ask an ultra marathon runner to do a 100-meter dash because they're not built for it. But I do think it's cool when I see a marathon runner and a bodybuilder come to a free running class and both work on the same stuff, and they come up with different ways to do it. They come up with different parts of it that they're good at. One is really good at one thing, the other one's good at something else. And we see how coming from different angles and different backgrounds, it really starts to bring something new to everything we're doing. And for me, like, I think one of the most exciting things about free running right now is not the athletic side. It's what's going on in the culture around it. We're seeing people like Store, who are not the best physically at anything, being the biggest name in the sport as they progress what it means to have like parkour culture. I mean, they're working with Michael Bay and they're making like, $1 million projects in a video game. And it's amazing to see. I look at people like you or Jimmy the Giant that are out there making like auxiliary content to the sport, like stuff that helps like raise it up and explore different areas of it. Move Mag, and even the companies like we were talking about at the beginning that are making shoes now, Tempest and Farang and Store are all coming out with their own shoes. Like, yes, these shoes it's still expensive. They're still not perfect. It's still hard because it's really tough to make a shoe, but it's the start of getting something which actually is the best shoe for the sport, because it's made by the people that do it. And the more that it happens, the more we support this community, the bigger the culture will get, and the more we're going to see these people going to the edges of different things, whether it's physically, whether it's mental game, whether whether it's the cultural aspects of it. It's just going to keep pushing. And I think that's why I'm excited to see more stuff like this happening. It was a big shift, I think, when we started to see people that were really good coaches that weren't great athletes. And that to me was a big step for the sport, because it inspired a lot of people to start opening training facilities or classes or meetups where the focus was helping others, not just helping themselves. And I'm very grateful for that wave that we had that continues to grow, because we're seeing the benefits of it in a lot of these young athletes coming out of Sweden and the US and Japan that are just unbelievably talented. And it's because of the efforts of people who are not the most physically gifted necessarily, but are the most inspired to help others.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been a fascinating ride to watch the community grow in all the different ways that it can grow. So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that. It seems to me like you made a decision to have a career in parkour, and fairly early on, you started to think about what the post-performance side of that looked like.
Yeah,
it seemed like you. Yeah, and I'm curious how you how did that happen? Because I don't think a lot of athletes are really making that step of saying, I'm good enough now that I can get jobs, right? But that's probably not going to be around forever. How am I going to leverage these connections now in order to do something that's interesting to me going forward?
Well, I know that the place where it started was me being a kid in math class, like not paying attention to math, being like, I'm not going to do anything math related in my life. And saying, like, right now I'm just dreaming about going outside and practicing doing aerials, because I was like almost got my aerial down, So I was like so stoked on that. I was like, oh, someday, like, I'm gonna like do all these things. I'm gonna live in a house where there's like a bunch of other parkour guys, and we're gonna have like a foam pit in the middle of it. We're gonna jump in it. Or like someday I'm gonna go to a competition and it's gonna be like our team versus like the UK team. Or like someday I'm gonna like be an old guy, like on the mic being like, back in my day, we conged uphill both ways to the training academy, and it's just that all of those things started happening sooner than I anticipated. And simultaneously, I think my own mortality and physical capabilities got brought into light as I started to have some of my first serious injuries. My main one was for my back. When I was still living in DC, I did Ninja Warrior the first time, because my girlfriend at the time lived in Santa Monica. So I was like, oh, I can get out to Santa Monica to try out for Ninja Warrior. I'll get to see her, take some time off. And I qualified for the finals. It was amazing. I was like superstar on the show already because I talked so much trash and had like set a record for qualifying time. So I was like, oh, I'm going to be a star there. It's going to be awesome. Then I came back to DC and I was shooting a video with the team, and I just blew out my back. And it was the worst injury I'd ever had. And here I was, this young dude, what I thought was like at the peak of my career, just being like, oh man, I'm busted. Like I can't even, I fell down in the bathroom and I couldn't get up. I was just had to lay on the floor. I didn't have a phone there. I didn't have anything to do. No one was home. So I was just like, this is terrible. And at the time I was already very interested in the business side of things, because I think I had that sort of mindset since I was early in school, like not even before I was even in high school, I was already like interested in business and what we were capable of. And so when I joined up with Mark, part of the sort of caveat to me getting involved with APK was that I could help run things from the marketing side, and was helping to build it even as a young kid. Like I saw the potential of what it could be. So helping with the transition of some of the clothes they were doing to working with some actual artists to design some things, as opposed to just saying things which said parkour, even though they sold the most. But I think I was like, okay, well, I'm interested in the bigger world of this. What can I do to help build this up? And I think that sort of childhood dream of like wanting to be a voice for the sport really stood out. And I saw competition starting to come together. I saw Art of Motion start to happen. And Travis Wong who's a good friend of mine now. At the time, I was like, this dude, he's like not even in the sport, and he's like starting to do this. But there was a pushback from Mark about being involved with Red Bull at the time. And so I had kind of battled back and forth with how to get involved. But once I moved to California, I was sort of like over it, and I was like, I think I want to get involved. So I took a job, and actually was very grateful. My wife and her sister helped me talk to Victor Lopez from Tempest, and he actually sponsored me going out to Sweden for the first Air Whip Challenge, where they had like a real live stream, because they had one guy in the past who had done it. I think he got kind of drunk or something. They were just like partying, and so they're like, okay, we want someone who'll take it seriously. We can't pay, we can't do any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, put me out there, let me show how it can be done. And I took that job, and I just gave it like everything I had. Like I studied everything. I was on the course every day. I talked to every athlete. I just was like, somebody needs to take this seriously. And from there, I got to spend some time with Nico Wojciech. He's now Nico Martel at Air Whip, because he was a judge there, and he's the sports director for Red Bull Art of Motion. So I was like, if you ever need somebody to get involved, like do this, blah, blah, blah. But at the time, Travis Wong had the job as the MC, and they had their hosting team. It was all set. And then thank God for Michael Bay, because they did another Transformers movie, and they offered Travis Wong a stunt job, which pays significantly more than hosting jobs. And he was already committed to it. So I got fortunate again, because he actually bought my ticket to cover for him at Red Bull Art of Motion to be the live MC. And so I took that job at the last minute. I remember getting the call from Nico, just be like, hey, what do you want to do next week? You want to come to Greece? So I did a couple years of that, and I just kept pushing that. Like, I was like, look, I think that I'm really good at this job, but I would be even better in commentary. And you guys would be really lucky to have me do this, because I'm the best in this sport at this, which I guess was true, but also was completely unproven at the time. But I just decided at that moment, like, I'm going to do this. Like, I'm going to be the best at this, because nobody else is doing a good enough job to really talk about this from a sports side. And doing it for Art of Motion, and then subsequently for NAPC, I think was a huge shift for me in the sport, because I saw, especially talking with the guys from Origins, Renee and Tom, about the actual sport itself and what was happening from an athletic standpoint. I was like, this should be treated as an Olympic sport, because of the level of difficulty, because of the abilities of the athletes, because of the training that goes into this, because of everything that you don't see during a competition, during a video, what's going into each of these things. Somebody needs to give a voice to these athletes, to this sport, to this energy that's pouring into this. And so I just did everything I could to really pay tribute to everything that was going on behind the scenes, and to make it as fun and professional as it could be, and to take it as seriously as it deserved. And it's been an amazing ride from there, because we've now seen years of competitions where they've subsequently gotten better every single year. The quality, the broadcasts, not just in Red Bull Art of Motion, but at APC. I mean, Air Whip until it recently ended.
Apex.
Yes, Apex was a fantastic one. I know that we've had some back and forth with some of the other competitions that are coming, and I turned down the FIG competitions because they asked me to come out and do it, and I really just feel like what we are building from a grassroots level and through partnerships that are really strong, like the partnership that we've developed with Red Bull, where the actual athletes and the sport have control over what's going on. I think that's where this sport needs to grow from, and not from this other direction. Gymnastics. Yes, and I feel really strongly about it, and I may have screwed myself out of a chance to host the Olympics in 2024 or 2028 or whenever it happens, or maybe I did the right thing, but I know that for me, I couldn't make any other choice. I really felt like to stand true to what I believe in, I wasn't going to support an event that I don't support. And I have no problem with any of the athletes that went and did it. I think that there's not enough support for professional athletes right now. The level of training and effort and energy and personal resources that go into being an elite athlete at that level, they deserve opportunities to show off what they do and to be rewarded for it. I just really hate that the people that are doing it right now don't, in my opinion, have the best intentions in mind for the sport. So I hope to find more ways to support grassroots competition or programs and events like Red Bull Art of Motion. I'm really excited to see more projects like what we did with Human Pinball, and also with stuff that Tempest has been doing in terms of like online competitions and providing free access to a global community to really get recognized for what they're doing. I think I look at what's going on in Japan and especially in the Middle East in terms of recognizing the skill level out there. I mean, I had no idea how good Iran, Iraq, like all of these places just have these athletes that are insane, and they are just doing amazing stuff. And they're finally getting a chance to have the light shined on them. And it's up to us as a community to help build that culture up around what's going on in the sport and the people that are doing it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I agree. If we can support the grassroots and what people like Renee and Tom and Ryan and the guys at Airwhip have done, that's a much healthier future for the sport. I wanted to ask you about your performance retirement. Right, you put out a video. I think it was "I Was Never Here" a couple of years ago.
Never Here, yeah.
Never Here, and it was kind of like, so basically you're done as a performance athlete. And I'm curious what your relationship with personally with the discipline looks like kind of after that. Are you still training regularly, pushing things? Are you like, do you do other things with your body and kind of not focus on parkour? Like, how's that changed?
Well, I'm obviously still very involved in the sport. I'm still hosting events, doing commentary for Art of Motion, and really anybody that I think is doing good quality events. I'm also, I just got a chance to be movement director for this Pasha's pinball project, which was an incredible opportunity. I've had the chance to be choreographer for a bunch of different cool projects. This Ringling Brothers Last Circus they did. I did choreography for it for some fashion shows for Nike and Nickelodeon. Like just kind of like finding more ways to use this experience to help build something, especially from a creative artistic standpoint. And then obviously still involved with Tempest and everything we're doing here on the West Coast and Texas. But I think from my personal standpoint, I was ready to switch how I treated myself, even though for the most part, I had already stopped competing a long time ago. I wasn't doing a lot of the elite level stuff. Actually, almost 100% of that footage had been shot 2 years earlier. It was stuff for another project we had done for the team that had never come out. And I got actually not even all of my footage. I'm actually a little sad about a couple of the lines that I didn't get the footage of, but it was just lost on a hard drive. And so I found that, and I just moved to New York with my wife for a year to work on another project. And I started tinkering with the video. I'd been really inspired by Rodney Mullen's like 50-year-old birthday video he did with, I think it was Vanity Fair or something. It was like a really unique project, just black and white, and he's on the camera spinning around him. And I just remember like thinking like, okay, well, I want to share this with people, but I want to create something that's reflective of like the person I am now, that feels like where I think the sport could go. And I remember when I first started experimenting with the editing process and with putting together the lines in a way that to me was less about what you saw and more about what it felt like to be there. And I know that like this sport is going to continue to grow, and it will evolve so far past any of the input that I had. And that was a little hard for me. There was always a part of me that was like, oh, I want to be like an icon or a legend, or like, I want to be like remembered forever for the things that I did. And who knows what's going to happen in the future, and years down the road, people, they could never move again. We could get rocket boots implanted in our feet and everyone's going to forget because they can just fly, and they don't need to jump anymore because they fly. And that's going to be amazing. But I'll always know what happened, and I'll always remember these experiences that I've had and the people I shared it with and the places I've gone and the things that I've seen. So even if someday it seems like I was never here, I was, and it was amazing.
Mm-hmm. So do you train parkour at all now, or you do other physical stuff, or kind of?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I can't help myself. I actually have a lot more fun now than I think in my last few years when I was still like acting as a professional athlete. Because I was still doing like commercial stunt work and some limited like performance stuff, but mostly I was just trying to keep my skills honed. And now when I go out to train, it's whatever I feel like training. And it's a lot of cross training too, because I got really into paddle boarding and kayaking because I'm here in Southern California where it's gorgeous. I do a lot of bike riding, which is nice for my knees and back. And the training I do is a lot more exploratory. You know, I can play again in a way where there's no motivation other than the joy of play. And it feels like being a kid again. And especially now as a new dad, you know, I've got a 6-week-old at home and I'm playing with him, and, you know, just seeing as he's discovering how to like kind of rock back and forth, or like when he pushes his hand against me or his feet, he can push himself around a little bit. Like, I'm inspired by those little moments. And I think when I go out to play, or when I'm just messing around with him on the floor, I find myself in that same joy of discovery that I had 2 decades ago, going out on my porch or on the playground and climbing and jumping off stuff.
Beautiful. Yeah. That's what it's all about, is being able to continually come back to that source of joy with the practice. And I think that's a good place for us to stop. I'd love to talk more about the future of competitions and what's going on with FIG and the presentations and being a commentator and all that. But I think that's the right message to end on there.
Yeah, it feels good. But yeah, I'm always happy to talk more shop. So
awesome.
See if the people like the show, maybe come back for a sequel.
I just noticed that your name has been Dina Epstein this entire time down at the bottom.
Yeah, that's my wife's name. I used her computer for this.
Okay. Well, that's all for today. Thanks, Frosty.
Hey, you've reached the end of another Evolve Move Play podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, if you want to be involved in the conversation, please consider joining us in our new membership subscription so you can get access to question and answers with our live speakers once a month, question and answers with me once a month, and a dedicated forum to discuss everything going on in the podcast, as well as a general discussion of movement on our general movement forums. If you're interested in that, make sure to check out the link below, get signed up, and join a part of our membership community. If you can't join our membership community right now, it's still always helpful if you can like, share, and subscribe, and even hit that bell and get notifications for upcoming Evolve Move Play podcasts. But adios for now, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.